of Communication and Community at PreSeed Ventures. And today we're gonna cover a few things that I think is really good to remember if you're gonna test out doing your own PR as a founder in an early stage startup. We're not gonna get too much into getting the right story out or how to find the right angle for your story, but more go into some of the basics of PR that are really good to understand before you get started. So the first thing I want to cover is timing. Is the time always right for doing PR? My very clear answer is no. You need to have a very defined and clear purpose for doing it, and need to figure out what is the call to action you want to trigger. There's typically 4 reasons for this that I find is good reasons for doing PR. One is validation, building validation and trust in your company if it's very young and people don't know it. PR is the perfect strategy for building some validation. The second is brand positioning. So positioning who you are and raising brand awareness. The third is funding. Investors like PR as well. And if they read about your startup and haven't heard about you, or have heard about you but didn't think it was relevant, you can definitely trigger that investor FOMO with your PR. And the last is employer branding. Especially if you're an early stage startup, maybe just raised a little bit of funding, you're typically interested in getting a lot of people on board in your startup. And why should they come and work for you if they never heard about you, nobody else ever heard about you? Maybe the salary is even worse than in other jobs they could get. PR is a good way to tell them why they should work for you. Maybe not straight up, but showing them in other ways. The second thing I want to cover is exclusive release versus wide release. You got your story, you know when to get it out, but you need to figure out whether you want to make an exclusive release of your story or a wide release of your story. An exclusive release is when you give the story to a journalist and tell them that they can have it exclusively for themselves. Whereas a wide release, you don't sell the story or pitch the story to a specific journalist, you just send it out to a wide array of media. As an early stage startup, I would always recommend you to go the exclusive way. Sending out a wide press release, if you have a story that is not super big, you're not being Novo Nordisk or Apple releasing the next iPhone. So lots of time media is not just gonna pick your story up automatically. So it's much better to build a relationship to a few journalists and offer one of them the story exclusively. Then you can make a wide release afterwards where you send a press release to a series of media and hope that they are gonna pick it up, but you will have the one exclusive story. So about exclusivity, there is one good thing to know. I'm sure TechCrunch is on your radar if you're a founder. And sometimes TechCrunch want exclusivity on a story no matter what. So you can't say that they have exclusivity internationally, but give it to a Danish journalist exclusively as well. So if you want to try to get your story in TechCrunch, then spend the time pitching your story to them first before you pitch it to anyone else. When you know whether they're going to take the story and if they do so, when they're going to publish the story, then you can sell it to local journalists in each country that you're aiming to get your story out in. The last thing I want to mention is don't shotgun your press release. Journalists are getting 1,000 emails every day, and they're gonna spot right away if you're sending them an email that is completely generic and not a story that you're trying to give them. Of course, if you're making a wide release, you can do it in a bit more of a generic way, but the best strategy, in my opinion, is still to make them feel special if you're completely new in the game. Okay, so the next thing is to map your media landscape. You know what your timing will be for the story. You got a clear call to action, maybe a press release ready. then you have to figure out what type of media do you want your story to get out in. We have a tendency to focus on the top tier media in the market we are in or in the startup landscape, but actually you need to think about what your strategic goal is. Is it to recruit a lot of people? Then you have to figure out where are those type of people you're recruiting maybe reading your stories. It could be niche media in fintech or in gaming or wherever you're focused at, instead of just going for the generic startup or tech media. If you're running out of money and want to get the attention of investors, then you maybe want to focus completely on tech and startup media, like Tech EU, EU startups, TechCrunch, and those type of medias. If you are aiming to get customers, maybe you want to focus on business media in the markets you're in, and so on and so forth. The last, but maybe most important thing is to understand how journalists think. Research who writes stories about your domain or area of business. Follow them in their channels. If it's internationally, Twitter is a really good way to follow your journalists. Often journalists will be quite active on Twitter. If it's in Denmark, at least, LinkedIn is way better. Some are, of course, not active in any of those media. Then follow their stories, read up on what they have been particularly interested in lately. That way you can make sure that you both customize the stories that you pitch for them, but also that you don't waste their time with things that won't be interesting to them. Journalists get 1,000 emails every day and everybody wants them to write their story. So they're gonna stop paying attention to you if they feel you waste their time too often. Okay, that was it from me. I could go on and on and on about doing PR, but these were some of the most vital elements that I think you should know and understand before you get started. If you are more curious about PR, then there is a startup talk at psvacademy.dk where we go into depth with how to shape your story, how to find your angle for the story, what your PR strategy should be in a startup. So head over there and get to know more about it.